Hey guys, my name is Nick and welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another episode of In Depth. Now this is the series where I go into sort of pretty serious detail about specific models, mainly focused on Tzeentch Daemons and Thousand Sons. So I'll leave a link in the description below for some of the other parts of this series, but in this particular video we are going to be looking at one of the big chickens, one of the greater demons, well, kind of greater demon, the Lord of Change himself. So what we'll do is we'll go through the stats, what I think is pretty good, you know, sort of the pros, and then more importantly the cons, and there might be a few in this video for this particular model, and kind of how you can beat this kind of model if you face it in your games. So let's get straight into the video. So here we go then guys, the Lord of Change himself. Now this is an HQ choice for your Tzeentch Demon army. Comes in at a power level of 17. Now you will need both chapter approved and Codex Demons in order to field him, because there was a massive points change. So if you've got the original Codex Demons, you will find that this guy is 320 points. And for that 320 points, it comes with a Staff of Tzeentch, which is his only weapon, but you can take a Baleful Sword or a Rod of Sorcery. Now that Baleful Sword actually costs you 10 points as per the original codex, making him 330 points in total. However, with the inception of Chapter Approved 2018, it was found that this was exceptionally overcosted, and probably still is. Now the points have changed, so your Lord of Change is now a base cost of 270 points, and with a Baleful Sword, he is 275 points. So the sword dropped by 5 points, and the Lord of Change, in effect, dropped by 50 points. Alternatively, you can take the Rod of Sorcery, and that still remains at 10 points itself. So Rod of Sorcery and your Lord of Change will come in at 280 points. For those of you that do use unofficial applications like Battlescribe, that is all correct in there, so the points have been adjusted in there since Chapter Approved 2018, but that, you know, it has been out a year, so I'd have expected that anyway. But let's get into the statistics of the model. So for all those points, you're going to get a variable movement and variable attack statistic, so we'll come on to the damage table in a second, but he has a weapon skill of 2+, a ballistic skill of 2+, a strength of 6, toughness of 7, 16 wounds, a leadership of 10, and a save of 6+. Now, as mentioned, he does have a damage profile, which means the more damage he takes, the less his statistics are. But at full wounds and down to just 9 wounds, he has a move of 12 inches, 5 attacks, and he has a psychic test bonus, very similar to Magnus the Red himself. Of any psychic powers that he casts, you're adding +2 to that dice roll, which really helps when you're looking at getting off larger smites or some of the more powerful spells. As he drops down in profile to 5 to 8 wounds, that movement drops to just 8 inches with 4 attacks and a psychic test bonus of +1. And then finally on the bottom tier at 1 to 4 wounds, he just has a measly move of 6 inches, 3 attacks but no bonus to that psychic test. As mentioned, his war gear options, you can take a Baleful Sword or a Rod of Sorcery, which I did mention were 5 or 10 points now. The Baleful Sword and the Staff of Tzeentch are both melee type weapons. The Baleful Sword giving you +1 strength, making him strength 7, an AP of -3 and a damage of D6. However, when you're attacking with this weapon, you have to -1 from the hit roll, so in effect you're now hitting on 3+ against anything that doesn't have further modifiers. The Staff of Tzeentch, again, is a melee weapon, no improvement to the strength, it stays at strength 6, with an AP of -2 but a flat 3 damage. However, the bonus of this one is every time you kill a character with that weapon, you can add a Chaos Spawn to your army and set it up pretty much where the character was before it was removed. The Lord of Change has several abilities, Demonic, Ephemeral Form and Demonic Ritual. This basically gives you a 5+ invulnerable save, boosted by Ephemeral Form to a 4+ invulnerable save, and Demonic Ritual allowing you to summon demons. If you're not taking a Baleful Sword, you can take the Rod of Sorcery. Now the Rod of Sorcery increases the range of this model's smite from 18 to 30 inches. Its buffing power as a greater demon means that all friendly Tzeentch demon units within 6 inches of this model can use this leadership of the Lord of Change for any morale tests. Now, given a lot of lesser demons have a leadership of 6 or 7, that could come into a pretty powerful effect. Being Tzeentch, the model is a Psyker, and it can attempt to manifest 2 psychic powers in each friendly psychic phase, and attempt to deny 2 psychic powers in each enemy psychic phase. As with all psykers, it knows Smite and 3 psychic powers from the Tzeentch discipline. And as I mentioned earlier, within that damage profile, you're getting +2 or +1 to that psychic test as a bonus, and that works on manifesting or denying psychic powers. You can add that bonus. The faction keywords are Chaos, Tzeentch and Demon, and the keywords are Character, Monster, Fly, Psyker and Lord of Change. So based just on the data slate entry, let's talk about the positives then. So the Lord of Change, he's good positives. He's got a weapon skill of 2+, that's pretty damn good. He's got the toughness of a vehicle, toughness 7, that's very good. 16 wounds is pretty epic, and a 4+ invulnerable save. Not a lot of stuff these days gets a 4+ invulnerable save, especially when you've got a sort of a higher toughness and that many wounds. So getting through that 4+ invulnerable save with conventional weaponry is going to be pretty tricky. Movement of 12 isn't terribly bad. It's not the best, but it's not a bad statistic. And 5 attacks is actually pretty good, especially when you consider some of the weapons that he's got, right? So let's talk about the 2 options of your melee weapons. So as you can see in the pictures, I've actually given mine a baleful sword because I wanted that added strength. So a strength 7 close combat weapon with AP -3 doing D6 damage, very similar to a last cannon kind of damage, is pretty good. Yes, you are minusing 1 from that hit roll, but that's not terrible. You're still hitting on 3s with 5 attacks. Now that's not to be sniffed at, that's definitely a positive. If you did want to take the Rod of Sorcery instead of that baleful sword, you are going to be getting that increased range attack with Smite, and a 30-inch Smite is certainly not something to be sniffed at, especially when you have a 12-inch move, giving you an effective Smite range of 42 inches. That's probably one of the largest in the game. Now your Staff of Tzeentch, which is your main weapon, which comes with the model, strength 6, AP -2, and a flat 3 damage. A lot of these tough models these days, like Aggressors and Necron Destroyers and so on, that have that 3 wound profile, getting through that with 5 attacks is pretty good. You're knocking these things down to a really low save with that AP -2. And for a little bit of fun, if you get to kill a character, then you're going to turn it into a spawn, providing you've got a spawn model available. But for me, my preference here is to take that +1 strength baleful sword and ignore the Rod of Sorcery, because with an 18-inch Smite, with that move of 12, your Smite is still pretty good. The other good thing about this model is the ability to cast 2 psychic powers, so you can Smite or you can use 2 other powers from the Tzeentch discipline, and we'll cover the psychic options shortly. In my opinion, the other essential keyword here is Fly. That's really going to help you. He's got giant bat wings, so he's going to be flying all over the place, so that gives him that added movement. But Fly is a very critical ability to have in 8th edition. So those for me are the stock benefits, or the stock strengths of that Lord of Change. Now let's discuss the negatives straight off of the data slate before we try and work out ways to make him a little bit better. The first thing to be concerned about is your 16 wounds and character. That means that you are still fair game, anyone can still shoot you, you can't hide, you are going to be a big fire magnet with those massive wings, and it is a massive model. You can see from some of the pictures on the screen how big this guy is. There's a comparison on the screen of like a Dreadnought and a Marine. He is huge. No piece of terrain realistically is going to hide him, so he is going to draw lots of big guns, and all you've got to do to rely on that is a 4+ invulnerable save. That is a lot of points, a lot of power level, depending whether you're playing sort of narrative or open versus match play. He's going to draw a lot of fire, and you're not going to be able to do much about it. Now, one of the big gripes I have with this particular model is his buffing ability. So many characters these days give you loads of nice re-rolls, to wound or to hit or anything like that. This guy's buffing ability is to give you a boost of leadership in the morale phase to demons within just 6 inches. Now, okay, auras are normally 6 inches, but demons come in quite a large number on the most part. And you know what? They've all got a 4+ invulnerable save. They've probably got, other than the really small ones, they've got multiple wounds. They're not really going to be going anywhere. And if they do lose combat and they do go somewhere, they're pretty disposable. So are you going to be overly fussed if you fail a morale test on some of those lesser demons? For me, probably not so much. I'd much rather have some kind of reroll or some kind of other ability that some of the other models that are available to you have. So for me, the buffing power on this is poop. As with all other models in the game though, he is not immune to being smited, he's not immune to mortal wounds himself. So anything that can dish out mortal wounds is going to go straight through your 4+ invulnerable save and start chipping off wounds, regardless of your toughness of 7. Another thing I also don't like, that Baleful Sword giving you +1 strength. You are going to be wounding most things on a 3+ anyway. Very little in the game outside of vehicles is higher than that. So if you're taking on something of a toughness of 7, yes, you might want the Baleful Sword. That's the reason why I've taken it, because I'm using it as a bit of much of an anti-flyer or an anti-tank unit. But if you're taking on infantry that's typically a toughness 4 or 5, you're not really going to get any bonus out of that +1 strength. If it was +2 strength though, yeah, you might be thinking something a bit better. So those are the stock negatives. Now let's see if we can make this guy a bit better. Don't forget your Tzeentch Locus of Trickery though. Something I tend to forget when I'm playing with my Tzeentch Daemons as an allied detachment to my Thousand Sons, is that you roll 2 dice at the start of each fight phase and discard the highest result, and until the end of that phase, every time your opponent targets a Tzeentch Daemon within 6 inches of a friendly model with the Locus of Trickery and makes a hit roll after rerolls but before modifiers that matches that dice result, the hit roll fails. As he is a character in a Chaos Demon detachment, he is going to gain that demonic locus, so he will have that ability at all times. If you're going to make this guy your warlord, let's take a look at the Tzeentch warlord traits. So we have Born of Sorcery. You can add 1 to the result of the psychic test made for your warlord in each psychic phase. Now if you've already got that bonus of +2 or +1 from the damage profile, you're going to be going to +3 or +2 or +1 even on the lowest profile. That is pretty epic, especially if you're looking to smite and you need, if you're going to get the super smite, where you're going to need a roll of more than 10 to get D6 mortal wounds off, you're only going to need an 8 on the dice to be able to do that. So Born of Sorcery, definitely one to consider. The second one is Incorporeal Form, and where you reduce all damage inflicted on your warlord by 1 to a minimum of 1. So for example, if you inflict something with 3 damage, it will only lose 2 wounds. Not too bad, but bear in mind that you're chinning everything on a 4+ invulnerable save. I'd probably take Born of Sorcery still. The third option is Warp Tether. You can reroll failed morale tests for friendly Tzeentch Demon units within 9 inches of your warlord. Now bear in mind that the buffing ability of this is only 6 inches. You're going to get a reroll. Is that really, really worth it? What you really want is a reroll of the 10, because that's the leadership bonus you're getting from the greater demon power. So 9 inches, yeah, that's a good number, because everyone knows that Tzeentch magic number is 9. But is it really worth it? I'm probably not so keen, but it's not a bad option. The next option is Lawkeeper of Tzeentch, where you can add 6 to the range of the first psychic power manifested by your warlord in each psychic phase. Now, this is one of the reasons why I take the Baleful Sword, because I've already got an 18-inch range smite. Now I can add 6 inches to that for free by basically taking this this ability. But however, if you've taken the Rod of Sorcery, your smite range has just gained another 6 inches. Again, that is just insane. Option 5 is Tyrant of the Warp, and that is roll a dice each time your warlord suffers a perils, and on a 2+, your warlord's psychic mastery is such they do not suffer perils of the warp. That is pretty good when you're doing lots of psychic powers. The last thing you want to do is be taking mortal wounds on yourself, and you can ignore it on a 2+. However, most people always save their strategic reroll, especially if you're running a psychic heavy force, just on that time that the double 6 or the double 1 turns up, that you can reroll one of those dice. So, do you really want to sacrifice that extra that reroll that you can always make for this particular ability? I'm not so sure. Finally then is Demon Spark. Reroll friendly wound rolls of 1 in the shooting phase for friendly Tzeentch Demon units within 9 inches of your warlord. Now a lot of Tzeentch Demons don't actually do a lot of shooting. There's a very few units. The Flamers, the Exalted Flamers, the Pink Horrors is pretty much your main shooting focus here. So re-rolling wound rolls of 1 in the shooting phase, not bad, but given that full list of 6, I think, you know what, Born of Sorcery for that add 1 to the psychic test is definitely one for me, and potentially Lawkeeper of Tzeentch to add 6 inches to that first psychic power, which, you know, most often is going to be Smite. So those are the 2 that I would highly recommend for your Warlord trait if you are taking the Lord of Tzeentch as your Warlord. And let's take a look at the psychic powers that this guy can take, and let's see if anything is any good for this guy. So the first one you've got is Boon of Change. So Warp charge of 7, select a friendly Tzeentch Demon unit within 18 inches of the Psyker, roll a d3, and on a result of a 1 you get an extra attack, a result of a 2 an extra point of strength, and a result of a 3 you gain +1 toughness. I've always struggled with using Boon of Change. I've taken it a few times on heralds and so on, and sometimes it works out, and then most of the time you completely forget what you've put it on. So quite often it's one of those ones where it's a nice idea, but in reality you probably forget in the heat of battle. Second one you can take is Bolt of Change, warp charge value of 8, and you get to pick a enemy unit within 18 inches of the Psyker and visible to it, and that unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. If a character is slain by that psychic power, you can then turn him into a spawn. This is a pretty good option for me, because you haven't got to go for nearest units like you do with Smite. And remember, with that +6 option in your Warlord trait, that makes this power, if you're not going to Smite first, a range of 24. That's pretty damn good. And then D3 mortal wounds is always a nice touch. With a warp charge of 8, and you've already got +2 because you're not taking the Warlord for the Warlord option for +3, the chance of getting this off is pretty high. The next option is Gaze of Fate, a warp charge value of 6, and if manifested you can re-roll a single dice later during your turn. This is quite a little cheeky one. Every now and then it can be quite situational that if you're running this, it saves you having to burn a command point for one of those re-rolls, or you can combine it and basically have 2 re-rolls in a turn, or a single phase, which is something that most armies cannot do. Definitely one potentially for the back pocket. Option 4, Treasons of Tzeentch, a warp charge of 8, and you can select an enemy character that is within 18 inches of the Psyker and visible, excluding the opponent's Warlord. Roll 2d6. If the result is greater than the character's leadership, you can treat the model as if it was a friendly model in your army in your shooting, charge and fight phases. At the end of the fight phase, it reverts to being an enemy model. Now again, with that Warlord trait, you can boost that to 24 inches, and 2d6, you're going to get an average of sort of 7 off the back of that. Most enemy warlords or enemy characters are going to have a higher leadership than 7. So it's a pretty iffy one to try and get off, in my opinion. So probably something that could be fun to use, but the reality is you're probably not going to beat an enemy character leadership. Option 5 is Flickering Flames, a warp charge of just 5. Pick a friendly Tzeentch Demon unit within 18 inches of the Psyker, and until the next psychic phase, add 1 to any wound rolls made for that unit's shooting weapons. One of my favourite options for running with my Flamer Bomb, adding 1 to those wound rolls is pretty good. Giving it to this guy, whether you're running him alongside Flamers or not, could be an interesting concept. It's definitely one to consider, right? So you've got 2 powers that you can pick out of this list, so we'll keep that one as an option until the end here. And then finally, the last option is Infernal Gateway, a warp charge of 8. If manifested, identify the nearest enemy model within 12 inches of the Psyker and visible, and every unit, friend or foe, within 3 inches of that model suffers D3 mortal wounds. The number of mortal wounds inflicted is D6 instead if the power manifested with a psychic test of 12+. Now getting 12+ is pretty tough, even with your +2 bonus, and this is one where you might consider, if you're going to try and run Infernal Gateway, you want to take the Warlord trait that gives you +1 to that as well. So a 12+, you can cast it basically on a 9, or you're going to get it on a 9. So that could be quite good fun to get off. But the reality is, it's going to be a difficult one, right? And it's very situational again. So out of your 2 powers that you would be considering, for me, Bolt of Change is definitely number 1 choice. And then I would suggest, depending on the rest of your army build, because if you're running a very melee heavy army, you don't want to be worrying about Flickering Flames, because it only works on shooting weapons. So you'd probably be considering something like Gaze of Fate as your second power option. So Bolt of Change, Gaze of Fate are probably the 2 that I would consider most effectively, with Flickering Flames a close third, although I'd prefer to run him on another character. If you cannot decide which psychic powers you want to take, maybe you want to take a third one. So let's talk about the Hellforged artifacts, and one of the good ones to take is the Endless Grimoire, and this allows a Tzeentch Psyker, to take an extra power from that Tzeentch discipline. So if you really wanted to take that extra one, this is the way to go with that particular Hellforged artifact. One artifact not to completely dismiss is the Impossible Robe. This gives you a base 4+ invulnerable save, so that means with Ephemeral Form you're now on a 3+ invulnerable save. But in addition, once per game you can re-roll a single failed saving throw for the wearer. But if that reroll results in a 1, the wearer is immediately slain. The problem I have here is that you can't reroll a reroll, so even if you save your command point for a reroll, you can't reroll that dice as far as I'm concerned. Therefore, yeah, a 3+ invulnerable save is nice, but you know what? That turn where you're on 16 wounds and the first one comes through and you fail and you go for the reroll and it's 1, 16 wounds, and one of your biggest points sink in your army is immediately gone. The other final option here for the Hellforged artifact is the Everstave, and a Tzeentch model with a Rod of Sorcery or a Staff of Change. Add 1 to the bearer's psychic tests when it attempts to manifest Smite. That means you're going to get Smite off a bit more powerfully or a bit more easily. Bear in mind that with Tzeentch Daemons, they're not like Thousand Suns. Your Smite ability starts on a 5, but every subsequent Smite that you try to cast will add 1 to that ability. So the first one is a 5, second one is a 6, third one is a 7, and so on. This increases your ability to get multiple smites if you're running a lot of smite-heavy Tzeentch characters within your Tzeentch Demon army. Finally, before we look at any abilities to try and buff this guy, let's have a quick look at the stratagems that could be pretty useful for this guy. Something that you might want to bank a few command points on. The first obvious one is Magical Boon for 1 command point. It's a Tzeentch Demon stratagem only. And at the end of your Psychic phase, select a Tzeentch Demon Psyker from your army. It can immediately attempt to manifest 1 additional Psychic power this turn. Now, if you've already taken that Grimoire, so you now know Smite and 3 powers, but you're only casting 2 a turn, for 1 command point, you can then kick out a potential 3rd power in the turn. For 2 command points, the Locus of Conjuration. Use this stratagem at the start of your Psychic phase and select a Tzeentch Demon character, which this guy is, from your army, and until the end of the phase you can re-roll any failed Psychic tests made for friendly Tzeentch Demon units within 6 inches of that model. That's pretty damn good for 2 command points, especially if you've got multiple Tzeentch characters that are all doing Psychic powers, all within that 6-inch buff. That's a good one for 2 command points. It's not overpriced, it's not underpriced. That can be pretty powerful. That is certainly one to consider your 2 command points for. So always have that stratagem card available to you. A little bit situational, but you could end up with a real heavy smite bomb formed from your heralds and so on all around your Lord of Change here. So that definitely makes him a little bit better. The Codex Demons stratagem page is a little bit thin because they're all quite god specific. So whether you're going Khorne or Nurgle, for example, there are a few generic ones, but for me those are probably the two best ones really. So finally then, let's talk about how to make him just that little bit better by the powers of other buffing units that can really take advantage of the Lord of Change's stat line. The first one to consider is your Herald, your Changecaster, your Fate Skimmer, whichever way you're running your Herald of Tzeentch. The ability of Locus of Tzeentch to add 1 to the strength characteristic of Tzeentch demon units within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly models with this ability. Running a Fate Skimmer so that he can at least keep up with the Lord of Change, because the Fate Skimmer has a move of 14, definitely something good. So you combine that with the Baleful Sword option. Your character, your Lord of Change, is now a strength of 8, and that's a game changer in combat, especially against most armies at a toughness 4 or less. You're now going to be wounding on a 2. Definitely a very handy bonus to have if you're going to start stacking some of these abilities that are amongst each other. I highly recommend that option. Second bonus is the Changeling. He's never been as good since he got really, really nerfed. The Locus of Transmogrification. That's going to basically give you a Feel No Pain 6+ roll of a Tzeentch Demon unit within 9 inches of the Changeling. So, 1 in 6 chance of every wound that you take on your Lord of Change can now be mitigated, and it doesn't lose that wound. And that will work against mortal wounds as well. So, not a bad option, but 1 in 6, you know what? Is it really worth it? Probably not as much. Finally, the only other real bonus that we can give is a Demon Prince of Chaos aligned to Tzeentch. So basically your Tzeentch Demon Prince. This, with the Prince of Chaos, you can re-roll hit rolls of 1 made for friendly Tzeentch Demon units within 6 inches of this model. This is something that is going to make up for the fact that your -1 to hit with that Baleful Sword, for example. You're going to get those re-rolls on the 1. Always quite useful. So it is another buff that you can give. So this means that you're going to be running sort of a character blob, really, of a Demon Prince, the Fate Skimmer, and the Lord of Change, all together, maybe with a Changecaster if you really feel the need. But that little bubble there is going to be quite powerful with those powers leeching all over each other. And that means your Demon Prince is going to be running with a leadership 10 instead of 9, and also your Heralds as well, which only have a leadership of 8, so they're going to be benefiting from that leadership of 10. but they're characters, so you know what? Leadership doesn't really matter. So what's the best way that I would recommend running him if you really are forced to run him? The Lord of Change is to run him, as I just said, with a Demon Prince and with a Fate Skimmer, and probably then screen with a bunch of Flamers. Having those Flamers around you gives you that 4+ bonus to your, well, a 4+ invulnerable save screen, which you can then cast on Flickering Flames to give you that extra wound roll. And it's going to make people think twice about assaulting you, especially with that Flamer, you know, auto hitting D6 shots. People are going to really be a bit concerned about trying to assault your Lord of Change surrounded by Flamers. So that'll probably be the best unit to run with them for me. But I'd love to hear in the comment section below what your thoughts are on it. Now, in summary, the Lord of Change is a big fire magnet. You need to run several units with him to get the best out of him, and for him to be able to try and boost other units as well. It's a lot of power level. It's a lot of points, even at 275 points. And I would probably rather run Changecasters, Fate Skimmers and Flux Masters instead of him. They can't be targeted. They're characters. They still kick out the same kind of smite, really. They're far less wounds, and they're not going to be shot because they're characters. And for me, I find those a little bit better. The Lord of Change just is going to attract too much fire for not enough buff and bonus to the rest of your army. So for me, if you see a Lord of Change on the field and you're having to face it, I wouldn't be overly afraid. It's going to kick out a few mortal wounds, yes. It's got 16 wounds, yes. But a 4+ invulnerable save is still a 50-50 save. And yet sometimes it's going to stop all your heavy weapons taking the damage off of him. But the reality is, a lot of them will still get through. So for me, you don't see a Lord of Change on the battlefield very often, and there's a reason for it. So there we go then, guys. That is the Lord of Change covered in depth. I am going to be doing one on Kairos Fateweaver just as soon as he is finished painting. But yeah, as you can tell from this particular video, I don't really rate him. He's a bit of a fire magnet, but you've heard all the details. But I'd love to know in the comment section below what you think. Do you come across him very often in your games? And if you're a Tzeentch Demon player, do you even bother to field him? Because there are many better options. But I'd love to hear from you in that comment section below, as I mentioned. But if you like this video and you want to see more, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and I shall catch you guys on the next video.